So a couple of things we're not going to cover, because you'll ask, what about this, okay? Handheld games, that's a whole other panel that I'll be doing next year in conjunction with this one. But that's kind of separate. Also, arcade machines, again, fascinating. Like if you watch the evolution from the Pong machines up into everything we have down there, it's amazing. There's some very skilled developers. We're not going to cover that. Yes, question?
Actually, I was just going to point out, there was like a movie that actually told about arcade games. It was called Pixels.
God almighty.
Security!
I'm just tech ops.
Yeah. Okay, so something else. Normally this is a 2-hour panel, and I get to show you guys a ton of awesome videos, and then we have a huge Q&A. And it was like a quiz, and I gave you all retro Atari games, because that's what I collect, and I always have duplicates. Unfortunately, MomoCon is a 1-hour panel. I've never done this in an hour, so I'm going to be talking like Sonic the Hedgehog and blasting through this. Blast processing. We're going to talk about blast processing, and I love it. And there's a weird picture of a hot dog that's so much fun, and it's an official ad, and it was weird, guys. It was weird. The 80s had a lot of drugs. Okay, so yeah, we're not going to cover handhelds, and we're not going to cover the arcade cabinets. But also, I like this to be a very loose panel. I'm just a video game fan. You guys are just video game fans. So if you have a question, you want to add something, go ahead and raise your hand. I'm not sure I can like have a full audience discussion because it is just a 1-hour panel. So all of that being said, we're going to jump through with the console wars. So the way that video games consoles are kind of segmented is by generation, and generally speaking, every generation is about 5 years. So when we talk about Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, that's what we're talking about, a period that was kind of the, people like us who think of a generation, we kind of bookend it, right? Like 1980 to 1995, that had a certain style of game. The late 80s had a different style of game. So it's arbitrary, but certain consoles and art styles mark that time. We're gonna start with Gen 1, which was 1970s, okay? Magnavox Odyssey. This was the first big commercially available home video game console. Generation 1. Noteworthy games. Tennis. Not Pong, it was tennis. And the games did not have real names. You didn't have stuff that was like, I'm gonna say Missile Command. You didn't have Missile Command. It was like numbers on a cartridge. Game 1, and you knew that was Missile Command-ish, right? So that's kind of how that worked, really simple. So when we think of Pong, we think of Pong. Of course that's Pong. That's the Pong of the 70s. Haha, how charming and retro.
Can I adjust that projector a little bit? It's really skewed.
Is that, that'd be a tech.
I get a tech person to do it.
Hi, I'm Tech Ops. How can I help you?
There you go. Projection's very skewed.
You tried to get at an angle.
Have you tried hitting Alt F4?
Should I plug on the cartridge? Keep going. Keep going.
Hold.
Right there.
Right
Right
there.
Right
there.
Perfect.
Okay.
Volunteers at MomoCon, everybody! We love them! Okay. Guess what, guys? This was not Magnavox Odyssey Pong. You guys ready?
Atari. Wow.
That was Magnavox Odyssey Pong, or tennis. Yeah, there was no line. The ball would bounce between those paddles, but kind of arbitrarily. It was weird. You're just kind of controlling light. There wasn't like a scoreboard like we saw before. So how do you make this look like, I mean, now this is like a really artful indie game that like IGN would be like, oh, its simplicity is just outstanding. It brings back these retro feels and cubism. No. It has a flowery bouquet. No. This is what they did. Whoop, I went past it. This is what they did. They had overlays, and it was literally a piece of plastic that you put on to help your imagination pretend that that's what it was. This is what tennis was. This is Pong, the early thing. This is another one that was cat and mouse, right? So in this game, you guide the cat and the mouse don't move here. That's part of the screen. What you have is the big light and the small light. And you play tag around this maze, except the maze, of course, is just a sticker, which means you can jump over walls.
Wow.
So people could just cheat. Because it wasn't really a game. It was like flashlights inside a television and you used your imagination. That is what we're talking about with the Magnavox Odyssey. That's where we're starting, is it's flashlights inside of a TV screen, really. It's like a puppet show. Which brings us to the Generation 2. And now we have actual games being developed, starting with the Atari 2600. Noteworthy games. E.T. I've played it. I have copies. It's fun. Star Wars. That's actually a really fun game on it, and it's really early in the licensing product stuff, so that's a fun thing to look at. Space Invaders, Frogger, and a terrible version of Pac-Man. It's really bad. It's not fun at all. Yeah, everyone knows the Atari 2600, pretty iconic, but you also had the Intellivision, D&D, Tron Deadly Disc, Star Strike, Q*bert, Dig Dug, all Intellivision games. Really fun, weird controller, right?
Yeah, it looks like a phone.
It looks like a phone, exactly. And there was an Atari controller that was kind of like that called the Paddle, and you used it for Super Breakout. That's kind of what they were emulating, but people didn't know what a game controller was going to be. It could have been anything. It could have. That could have been the norm, but that wasn't established quite yet. So people knew what a remote looked like, and it's going on their TV. That's where the inspiration came from. We also have the ColecoVision. Zaxxon, Cosmic Adventure, Burger Time, Beam Rider, Star Wars Arcade is a really fun one. And this is, again, we're used to having remotes, so they kind of copied that remote thing. But they added a joystick and a button on the top, which is kind of a nice compromise. ColecoVision games are pretty fun. I have a few of them, but no ColecoVision to play them on, unfortunately. So that was a really fun one. And this is when we actually get Pong. This is where we have game rules, right? The first bits of like game programming is happening around this time instead of it just being lights. That's a lot of fun. So we have this. We got Space Invaders, classic. Frogger. Space Invaders is fun because we all think of it like if we're gonna play a video game right now, we think of as we go further in the game, it gets harder. That's pretty much based on Space Invaders, where the number of ships, I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but the number of ships, there were so many at the beginning of the game that it was really slow computing the processing power to move them down. And as you took them out, there was literally more bytes of space. It could think faster. And so the ships got faster and faster and faster, making it harder as it went on. Other games were like, how did they do that? There's no memory in this thing. It's a calculator. It was an accident. The game was too good for the 2600, and it created this sloping difficulty, which became the norm for space games, and other games adopted it. So the fact that games get harder as they go on, we think of that as so granted. And books don't get harder to read. Movies don't get harder to watch. That's a game thing. And it really started around this time with games like these changing the processing power, which is just really fun to think about.
I was going to go with the Futurama explanation.
Yes.
Nobody got that right.
I got it.
Thank you.
You guys should sit together. I should be. All right, we have E.T. Unfortunately, we have to talk about the video game crash. Yes?
From 1983.
What?
Video game crash in 1983.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of people love to blame the video game crash in 1983 on E.T. because, oh wow, it was such a bad game. Guys, there are really bad games. There is a game made by Purina Pet Food that is broken, doesn't work, glitches, has no win thing. It's fuzz, and they say that there's like falling dog pedals and you're catching them. There's no win condition, there's no score, there's no point.
Wow.
It's like a screensaver. It's really bad. That type of thing is kind of what was contributing to it. E.T., because of the Christmas rush, had a name to it. Everyone knew E.T. That's what really started to sink in. And there were just so many of those awful bad games. People were returning them. The stores couldn't sell them. They went into discount bins. And at that time, someone didn't know that Missile Commander would be a classic game with really interesting gameplay that can get complicated, and that the Purina dog food game was dog food? Because video games hadn't been around long enough to do that. A game was a game, a book was a book.
Right.
So parents didn't know what they were getting their kids. So when it crashed, they had to fill a landfill with E.T. And there's a documentary on it. I'm sure you guys have watched it. It's really great. But that happened. We could have had no more video games. It could have been a fact. Yes.
Somebody actually did a documentary on YouTube about someone actually went into the same landfill it was dumped in along with other
Yep.
Atari consoles and tried to dig them out.
And they found him.
Yeah.
They got him. It's really
So
great.
it was just a rumor until that happened.
Yeah. I'm glad we could confirm it. Makes this panel a lot more interesting.
Oh yeah.
So we could have had no more video games. This con wouldn't have existed. We would have stopped. It would have been a funny little fad. Except for Nintendo. I went past it again. There we go. Nintendo. Nintendo did not call it a video game system. They called it the entertainment system. They marketed it to families, and they launched it in a place where, in Japan, they hadn't had as severe of a crash. The crash still happened. It wasn't quite as bad. The spike wasn't as drastic. So they call it the entertainment system. They market it towards families. You get a very strict seal of quality happening to ensure that no other parties can just be producing Nintendo stuff. That's where you get that gold Nintendo seal. We get Duck Hunt, Mario, Zelda, Punch-Out, Metroid. Real, actual games with gameplay that matter and that are innovative, and we're telling stories now. Metroid has a story, it's not lights. And it's building on stuff, and that's very exciting. That entertainment system name is what saved video games. We wouldn't be here if they hadn't marketed that and done that direction. If it had been video games, it might have been a thing in Japan. It would have been kind of a sub thing. So we might have had video games without them. That's why Nintendo is Nintendo. Yes.
Didn't they get like 60 million units worldwide in its lifetime?
If I had 2 hours, I'd have the huge stat sheet. I don't have that with me on this one, but it sold a lot. And I have one, and it's great. And they still work. That's amazing. Cars from back then don't work. Mine. Okay. Sega enters the market. Sega! I love Sega. I'm a Sega fanboy. They enter it with the SG-1000. This thing is crazy hard to find. Some cons have them, and I love playing them. Bonsai Con in South Carolina had one, and I played it for hours. Phantasy Star, Galaga, Moto Race, Pitfall 2, Cubert. Really fun control. I love that look. It looks like a sneaker right from the 1980s. Adore that. If you guys ever get a chance to play this, highly recommend it. But they weren't well known. They weren't Nintendo. So limited success. They follow very quickly with the Master System. And now people start knowing what that
Can
is.
you go back just a second?
Yeah.
Take a picture of that. Thank you so
Really fun.
much. Yeah. I didn't really understand.
Okay, Master System comes out. Afterburner, Double Dragon, the first Sonic, which we'll talk about in a bit, Golden Axe, Outrun Racing, Castle of Illusion. That game controller definitely takes a lot of things from Nintendo, but they still have a joystick. It's a little weird. They didn't commit to buttons yet.
Right.
It's a lot of fun to play, but the games suffer a little bit, but it's not Nintendo's. They're more creative than Nintendo, but they're not as good as Nintendo because of it. But it's definitely a really interesting entry to talk about. And if you guys ever get the chance to play these consoles, even if you don't love the games, just try it and see what that generation was doing so you know where we came from. I think that's really important for a video game historian. Atari, they need to come back. They have lost so much money. What are they going to do? Atari 5200. They bring out Space Invader, Frogger, Pole Position, Galaxin, Ball Blazer. When we finally were getting good controllers, look what Atari gave us.
They stuck to the old school.
Look at that. Now, the one before this was a joystick and a button. It was great. They let everyone else, they knew ColecoVision had a terrible time and reputation for doing that. And they do this.
And it didn't work either.
It didn't. It was really bad.
Wow.
So something interesting happens here where they don't make a lot of new games. They do, oh, okay, people want something new. They build a new console. They don't do an improvement. Now we think if we have a PlayStation 5 coming out, it's gonna be better than the PS4. That's what we think about. But back then, think about VCRs and televisions. They're not necessarily getting better, they're just different. They look different. That wasn't a thing yet. Sega had done that, and they had improved one. But that wasn't consistently something that happened in video game markets. So like a toaster oven, they released the 5200. It was different. It honestly was not that much better. That caused a lot of confusion for them later on. They then release the 7800. They fix the controller and then they break the controller.
Oh,
Do you see that directional pad? I've played this. It is hellish. You just want to cut it off. It's so bad, and it got crummy and dirty and not fun.
Yeah.
And again, they're not really getting yet that you need to innovate. You need to draw them in with something new. They still have Frogger at this point. I listed Frogger here twice.
Yeah.
They released a lot of Frogger, guys. Joust, Commando, Frogger, Donkey Kong. There's a long list of these. But this one did have some backwards compatibility, which was nice. But there were just so many issues that Atari had been the leader for so long that they didn't know what to do next.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when this was test run in California in 83, 84, it actually was more preferred over than Nintendo. However, due to lawsuits, it was not able to be released until 86, and so therefore all of its market value was just destroyed by them. Am I kind of got that right, or my
I don't know the marketing story behind the particular 7800. If I had the 2-hour panel, I'd probably go into that. But yeah, Atari's a mess. Wait till we get to the Jaguar, guys. I like that reaction. We can finally move on to the next generation. 16-bit. TurboGrafx 16.
Good. Good system.
It was an alright system. It came from the arcade cabinets, which were now pretty popular in the 80s. So we get Soldier Blade, R-Type, Pac-Land, Street Fighter 2, and Dead Moon. This is important. This console gave us the name. Also, it has TurboGrafx 16, but it's cutting it off. I think that's an issue with the projector, but it's pretend it says that up there. This console was the first to say 16-bit. And before that, they didn't call other stuff 8-bit. You know, this is fun because it starts using that terminology and kind of throwing that out there at us, which is really fun. Decent console for playing fighting games. Neo Geo. Again, these guys were the pros of the arcade cabinet in the 80s. This was the best system. A few problems.
Yeah.
Look at that control pad.
Yeah.
Look at all the extra mass. It doesn't need to be there. But people are so used to playing fighting games and laying their hand on that cabinet that they wanted that experience, and they wanted the players who came from their arcade games to have that. So they copped out. They just filled it full of plastic. Also, these games had such good art, and the art in this is amazing, that those cassettes are the size of VHS tapes.
Yep.
So think of an Atari cart, right? It's about 3x4. This stuff it's almost 9 inches long, and they're heavy. So there were a lot of issues with owning one of these. They were not efficient. Also, they were good systems.
Well, also those they cost the games cost $700.
Yeah.
$700?
It was basically like buying an arcade cabinet.
Yeah.
It was really bad. But this is what they were taking that from, and you can kind of see what their thinking is. They want all those buttons out. They want you to feel like you're at an arcade. Which again, that might have been the way video games gone. It's just not the way they wound up going. That's what we could have done. This is a great one that I'm working on for the next panel on a history of the arcade consoles. So, was it worth it? Well, remember, we're dealing with like the NES right now, right? Look at these graphics.
That is all.
NES cannot compare to this.
No, they can't.
At this time, this was the best looking console. This was the Ferrari of consoles.
Priceless.
It was priced like a Ferrari. It really was. But art-wise, what they were able to do, and those developers, those sprite memories.
Some nice sound effects in the background.
Yeah. That explains it. It's a fandom.
Someone say something Ruby related. Uncle Pro, I feel so good.
Q&A, wow. Okay. This art is fantastic. So other things try to get in on it. Sega Genesis, my personal favorite. I love this. Mortal Kombat, Sonic, Desert Strike, NBA Jam, Golden Axe. These games still hold up. For me, this is one of those consoles I can keep going back to. And play-wise, it can really hold up with indie releases, honestly. Really, really great. My copy it says not for resale. I've gotten it resaled from a used place. So that is like the most illegal card. It's great. Sonic. Oh, I love this guy. So much.
No, today.
Okay. I just have a lot of pieces of Sonic in here.
Right.
Because I love Sonic. So, now we start some fighting, right? Nintendo's NES cannot keep. You remember those graphics we saw? They can't keep up. They're still dealing with the original Mario. So they decide to counter. We get, again, more Marios, Zelda, Final Fantasy, Super Metroid, countless others, some of the best games. We get the RPG kind of born out of this, the JRPG. It's amazing. And the art, they know they can't go like the Neo Geo, so instead, they make their own signature style. You had a question?
Actually, I happen to know of like one game series that was like also playable on Super Nintendo, but it's Donkey Kong.
Look at that. Those are some good looking graphics.
One thing, I will say one thing Super Nintendo did better, in my opinion, than the Genesis was they just had a more epic sense of scope. Most of their games had a more epic sense of scope, in my opinion.
Yeah, they were very much breaking away from the arcade style at this point. Sega was still kind of doing one-offs. Sonic could have been an arcade game pretty easily, honestly.
I think it was at one time.
Was it?
I think
It was.
That's scary.
Yeah,
Wow.
because when Sonic the Hedgehog first came out, it first came out on arcade, but it didn't have. I don't think it actually was set up like an actual arcade scoring system.
Well, to be fair, Mario Brothers was also an arcade game originally.
Yeah.
But at this point, they're going for longness of play, especially with Final Fantasy, Link to the Past, those kind of games. So they start fighting. Let's talk for a bit about 8-bit versus 16-bit. We talked about that. Maybe you guys have never seen an actual side-by-side comparison of what those actual styles look like next to each other. This is what that is.
Oh yeah.
We have 8-bit versus 16-bit. That is the quality difference. It's really noticeable, and it allows your artist to do a lot more. So, remember when we were talking about the Master System? That black Sega one? There was a Sonic for it? This is what that looked like. The one on the left is the 16-bit one that we're all familiar with. The one on the right is that original 8-bit Sonic. They weren't really calling it 8-bit at the time.
Right.
But that was what the Master System could handle. And that's just kind of a really good frame of reference for you guys to know. If you guys are artists or anything, that's your level. And that's the level of immersion you can get. Neither of them are bad games, but that's the difference that you're looking at with 8 versus
Master
16.
System was more a European thing, though, wasn't it? One, two, pretty much.
With what?
Master System, wasn't that more of a European? Well, it got big in Europe, but didn't really get big over here.
Which system?
The Master System?
Master System?
Yeah, wasn't I thought it was more big in Europe.
It did really well in Europe, but also did really well in South America for a really long time.
Okay.
Sega versus Nintendo. Now they are fighting. Now you have those schoolyard fights. This is where it gets dirty. This is the console wars. They were throwing down. Angry Video Game Nerd does a beautiful 2-part series on this. That you guys, if you guys want to know the ins and outs, you guys got to watch that. Strong language. Don't watch that video if
There are kids around.
if there are kids around. I say looking at the young man. Cautious about recommending that video. But if you are of a age and you don't mind that type of language, really insightful. So I can hear the voice of this whenever I see it. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Oh, that grit. I can't even do it that well. You need to be like, you need to like scream.
Right.
That was all about the games, really, is what they were selling. Because in fairness, the Genesis, we're gonna start a fight here. The Genesis wasn't as advanced as the SNES was. It came out later. It had blast processing, which we'll talk about in a second, but their real claim to fame was their games. In a lot of cases, it was those licenses. If you guys remember the marketing for the Michael Jackson Moonwalk game, you want some corny 80s action, go find that. It's really bad. Game's also really bad, but kind of charming. That was where they were selling. They were selling the brand of what you would play more than the console. Nintendo sells Nintendo. Sega sold the games, really.
And what made things even worse with during the console wars is just that Nintendo literally had a licensing hold on all the major companies that were working with Sega at the time. They had to actually sign a contract for them to be exclusive on their system for a couple of years before they can actually branch out into other competing systems. But because of that, companies at the time like Konami actually created another company called Ultra Games, which sort of bypasses Nintendo's contract in order for them to go into different consoles.
Yeah, the developer line was drawn very deep in the sand, and you had to pick a side. But do you guys notice something about Sega here?
Oh yeah,
Do you guys see maybe history repeating itself a little bit?
Yeah.
Remember that huge pile of Atari games? Because they let a lot of third licenses in? Remember that crash? All right, keep that in mind. That's going to be important later. You're playing with power. This is a Nintendo ad. It's great. I love them. They're not even trying to fight. They're just along for the ride.
Yep.
This is a really funny video that I couldn't get to load, unfortunately, but it's awful. It's a F1 car and an ice cream truck racing each other to really terrible 80s chiptune. It just goes, Sega, Nintendo, Sega, Nintendo. That's it. That's pretty much it. It's really embarrassing. They don't make any claims because they can't say anything.
Right.
They just stuck the console in the back of two really bad cars and did like Michael Bay used this for inspiration. This is where his style started. Watch this. It's great. I mean, it's terrible, but it's great. I also have this one. This is, do you guys remember the Madden commercial?
Yeah, I remember that one.
I'm sorry I don't have videos on this one. It adds an extra 10 minutes to the panel. But it's just a bunch of like sporty looking people going like, I play football, you can hold a controller, we're basically the same. And then he gets a bunch of cheerleaders. I've played a lot of Madden, guys. I haven't kissed any cheerleaders.
Right.
I got a round of applause from someone. Someone clapped, that was awesome. This is my favorite one. If you're still playing Sega, NEC, or Nintendo, you're nothing but a weenie. If you're playing the incredibly high-powered Neo Geo system, you're a real hot dog.
I know it one too.
Will you give me the $1,000 to pay for the damn system?
So it wasn't just Sega and Nintendo fighting this out. There were others. But they had ads with hot dogs. And when I found this, I'm like, this can't be real. It's real. This went into magazines everywhere and bus stops. I love it. All right. We're gonna kill my favorite system. You ready?
And this is where everything went cuckoo.
Yeah, the Sega CD. So Sega realized they had the ability to make something great, but they weren't ready to build the investment time, and they knew Nintendo was working with something. Nintendo wasn't. They were way behind, but they had this paranoia. So they finished the CD drive, and instead of going, let's build a console around this, they just Frankensteined it in. They built the same software. You get Amazing Spider-Man, Echo the Dolphin, Rise of the Dragon, Star Wars Rebel Assault.
I really like the games for it.
I love the games for it. The actual games are great. The fact that you have to hook them together with a bunch of plastic and it breaks a lot and the pins snap off and you need 2 power sources and a ton of wires. This isn't as bad as it gets, but it's starting to get there. You're starting to see where they're losing it.
Are you saying the games are great or it has great games on it? Because there's a difference. Because I know most of that took advantage of the CD quality so they could just have quick time, Dragon's Lair style, let's watch the movie, hit this button, which was the majority of the game. It was less it had good, it was less the games were good and it had good games on it. So that's my argument against Sega CD.
It was a fun thing.
Yeah, I see what he's talking about. He's talking about the little FMV.
FMV. I need a panel on great FMVs of the 90s.
Right.
That would be a great panel.
It would.
It'd be like 5 minutes long.
Bad FMVs in the 90s, we'd be here all day.
Bloodletting.
They're the same thing. I love them.
Zelda's Adventure.
Oh.
So, this is what the other one looked like. So in case you guys don't know, there's 3 different types of Sega Genesis. They came in 3 different models. This is the Model 3. You couldn't put all of the... Because they did 3 different styles, the same CD attachments wouldn't work across the board. So they had to add to their manufacturing cost. And depending on your thing, you had to have something completely different. Well, moving on to Gen 5 now. Who haven't we heard about in a while?
Atari!
Whoops. Skipped it. My laptop is freaky. Okay. Atari Jaguar. Look at the controllers!
What on earth is that?
Not only do they keep the buttons, which we have all agreed, and everyone in the market agreed, were terrible. They took all of the labels off those controllers. So you don't know what number's what at a glance. That's fun.
But it had Alien versus Predator.
Good job.
It did. Space Harrier, Afterburner, Virtual Racing. It can run Doom. An oscillator can run Doom. It's fun. Find it on YouTube. I like the games for this system. Question in the back.
I wanted to say something about, like, I think there was a fighting game, but like the development for the Jaguar, but like I think like the developers screwed over Atari because Atari wouldn't agree to the deal, something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with developers and Atari around this time. They are trying so hard to stay relevant.
Isn't this Atari's last system?
Oh yeah.
Last home console? Are they making a new one?
They are. They're making a new one.
They are.
But it's not anything innovative. It's basically like the NES Classic version.
Oh.
With like they might do a few spoof titles or redo some stuff, but
People are still homebrewing the Jaguar.
yeah. I mean, the games on it were good. I enjoy the games. I enjoy the visuals of this. I hate you can't play it. It's almost unplayable. The joystick is so stiff. It's an unplayable controller, which ruins so many games. Which is a shame. The developers on these games worked really hard. The art assets, the artists who did this, and the programmers, they deserve a ton of credit. But they were working with a broken system.
The PC engine works better than that.
Here we go.
Another power cord.
Yeah. So at this point, you need so many cords coming out of this. So you need 2 outlets with extender strips to run this. It's really bad. I have a 32X actually. Space Harrier, Afterburner, Virtual Racing. Again, really good games.
Shadow Squadron. I still think one of the best space shooters ever.
I haven't played that. Shadow Squadron?
Really good game. 32X. Really my favorite 32X game.
I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna go play that later. They're trying again. Just like Atari, they're trying to stay relevant and they're pushing out stuff so fast there's no quality control. But because they were advertising themselves as the cool guys on the courtyard, they needed something constantly to keep people buying into it. So instead of releasing one new console, so by the time you have this, you have whatever games you have, plus you've paid for every add-on.
Yep.
You've paid for games for every add-on. You sometimes have special controllers for all these add-ons. You have invested so much money in it that adding something else new to it was cheaper than a new console, but people were starting to get really fed up with it.
Yeah, like the activator and like gun that he had.
So finally, they cut their losses and just release a new console.
Which killed the 32X sales.
The Saturn. Panzer Dragon, Virtual Cop, Guardian Heroes. They it was rough, guys. They didn't sell hardly anything because by this time, people had invested so much in that original mock-up Frankenstein of a thing. Why do they need something that wasn't going to be that much better? The games are good. They're not necessarily better than a 32X or a CD game at this point. So they didn't sell. And this...
Well, there's also the whole E3 1995 issue over that same day.
Oh, yes! Yes!
That's the most epic drop the mic moment Sony ever did on Sega.
Because it went as far back, the moment the Sega CD came out, that's when the snowball started coming in.
Speaking of Sony, a wonderful relationship started here. Nintendo had pretty much no idea how to handle the CD side of it. In-house, they couldn't do it. They were masters of games and lore and building that type of story that we love Nintendo for. Unfortunately, they couldn't quite keep up on the technical aspect of it. So they partnered with Sony and they said, we need you guys to build, because Sony was a hardware manufacturer, build us a CD reader we could add to this thing. There's a lot of really secretive stuff in this time. There are many, many books about this particular licensing agreement. It's infamous because it's super secret, but it's also very well known. And there's a lot of NDAs that are still active in Nintendo and are still active in Sony. There are potentially machines that were made during this time. Those are often called hoaxes. Some of people are convinced that they're real. It's kind of hard to find definitive proof because it's such a famous story. But there were definitely experiments going on. The partnership was real and they did certain development. Now Nintendo basically winds up saying, hey Sony, we're Nintendo. You're making a CD reader. You could never be us. Remember, we're gonna keep most of the profits, most of the licenses. You're basically like the guys who make our sound chip. Sony didn't like that. They said, you don't know how to do what we're doing, and you are going to fail without us. So, Sony pulls a little PlayStation 1. My first console growing up, Spyro. Spyro fans? Oh, who's excited for the remaster? Love that remaster. Oh, it's gonna be so great. If you guys haven't played Spyro, those first trilogy of games are some of the best level design in the 3D world ever. Spyro, Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, Crash Bandicoot. This is great. This is a fully 3D console that is all integrated. There's not a bunch of add-ons. It's great. But what was really great about this is it was easy to program. Sony had software that made it easy to make great games. And they were very open about it. They had quite a solid quality control. You guys remember the Atari Jaguar? Sega Saturn? Two things that those things had in common. The programming languages for those games were totally unique to those systems. So if you have programmers who are going, I have this great idea, I'm gonna pitch you a game, I'm gonna make up a game right now. Give me a noun at the side of the room. Dog. And what does the dog do? Run. Okay, we're gonna make a running dog game. It's gonna be awesome. I have this great concept. It's gonna be like parkour dogs. It's great. It's gonna sell a ton of copies. And they go, that sounds great. Here is your budget, here's your development studio. And the programmers get in there and they sit in front of a computer, and these are talented programmers, and they can't do anything because they don't know the language. The programming is totally alien to them. So they have to learn how to program in the language and how to handle those polygons, and then they can make the game. And that hurt the Atari Jaguar and the Sega Saturn in terrible ways where they're hurting their own developers. Sony at this point had seen that happen and went, here's everything you guys need. It's gonna be easy to program. It's 3D modeling in its heyday. Have fun. And the games of this time were really, really fun. You know, Bandicoot, Banjo-Kazooie, that become a little bit later, but there was a vibe of refreshingness because game developers were artists. And they were able to throw that back in, which is a blast. Crash Bandicoot, Tomb Raider, Spyro, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil 1. There was a panel at a con I went to once that was the best voice acting of that game. And it was great. They were cosplayers who reacted the scenes to the voiceover from the game. It was so great. It was a great panel. So Nintendo, they've lost their CDs. Everyone else is doing CDs. They got nothing. They are forced to do the 64. But they come out with some of the best games, despite the hardware limitations. Nintendo's really, really great about that. Ocarina of Time is probably one of the greatest games ever made. Super Mario 64, Super G, Wipeout, GoldenEye, a ton of Star Wars games came out for this.
Star Fox.
Star Fox, exactly. Their controller was funny. That is.
At least the Pro controller was better than the original.
That controller is just so unique. But that became their calling card, right? The Wii remote and everything. That's what they did. Question, yes.
Actually, this was prime against the PlayStation, and I'm not sure if it was the last straw or Nintendo's response to the disc system, but after the deal with Sony either fell through or behind Sony's back, they went to another hardware company by the name of Philips.
Yeah.
Their own console. I believe they called it the Philips CDI.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, that's more like a
Poor Nintendo. They try, guys. They try. But I'm always impressed looking at the PS1, which I think is some of the greatest games ever, right? Like think of the Final Fantasy titles. You have a system coming out after that with no disc and a controller that looks like that, and you release some of the best games of all time. That's impressive, and that is why Nintendo is Nintendo. They're gaming. They make the best games, honestly. They're fantastic. Super Mario 64. I love that game. I think that's actually the DS version.
No, actually, that's the one with
HD version.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to get the one from the original one. But yeah, it got
The
remastered.
original Mario 64 was more polygon.
I love
And 60
the
frames
original.
per second too. I think, wasn't it?
There are a ton of Star Wars games. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, guys. There are a ton of Star Wars games that came out. Rebel Assault, Pod Racer, the Shadow of the Empire. Beautiful Star Wars games, beautiful graphics, beautiful licensing. Some of my favorite games of all time. If I'm gonna play a non-retro game, this is usually what I go to. So we're moving on. We're into Generation 6. So.
One that
Dreamcast. Look at that controller. Question in the back.
Can we take a minute to acknowledge that for all the problems with the Sega Saturn, its advertising campaign gave us Sega Sanchino?
Take it
It's a gift to the world.
I actually don't know that.
You don't know about Sega?
I have to find this.
So they made a guy, like a superhero in Japan, with
Yeah.
Japanese advertising.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a theme song. Like you would come out and like Sega Sanchino, Sega.
It's funny, man.
That's my new ringtone.
It's funny, man.
I'm getting that.
But his name means play Sega Saturn. Sega Sanchino.
I love this.
And then like his last advertisement was the Dreamcast, where he like sacrifices himself to the Dreamcast and like his protege and carry on the name.
I love Japan.
Yeah.
So much. I went there last year, and it is as weird as you think it is. This system was actually really innovative. It had online multiplayer. One of the very first, I think it was the first system to actually do that.
Actually, multiplayer,
first.
yes,
Had the LAN
but it
connection
was,
in the back.
but the very first system that actually allows you to play online would actually be the Sega Saturn, because they had the Sega Channel along with both Sega Saturn and the Sega Genesis.
Sega's.
Yeah.
But then we get the Dreamcast. Skies of Arcadia, amazing game.
Yes.
Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Choo Choo Rocket. Half-Life Half-Life came out on this.
It didn't.
It did.
Didn't get released? I saw a copy. I guess that might be a demo copy, but okay. Resident Evil, Sword of the Berserk.
Marvel versus Capcom.
Oh yeah.
There were some great games. If you could get over the initial look of this thing, it's honestly, it has some great games.
Oh yeah.
And coming back to it, it's more popular now than it was back then because people really recognize it, especially Skies of Arcadia that became a Sony title. Really, really great.
And then the killer.
Oh yeah. The most sold console of all time at that time.
No, even now it's still top selling.
It's amazing. Killzone, Shadow of the Colossus, Bully, Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Grand Theft Auto, Ico, God of War. I love this console. There are some amazing games and they knocked it out of the park.
I was going to point out that a couple of my favorite games that I played on this system was the Samurai Warriors series and Dynasty Warriors.
I love Dynasty Warriors. I never played Dynasty Warriors like back on this. I have it on the new systems. This is an amazing system. It's great. GameCube. Because we don't have enough weird controllers. Sonic Riders, Wind Waker, Metroid Prime, Smash Brothers. Really fun.
The one thing about
I love this system. It was great.
It had a handle.
It had a handle. Yeah, that was great.
Here's the weirdest thing about the actual GameCube system. When the title was first released, it was of course it was trying to compete with the Sony PlayStation 2 since Sega had bowed out. However, Nintendo actually went back to Philips and created a brand new version of the GameCube that allows you to play not only GameCube games, but it also allows you to play CD games and DVD games. It was so incredibly rare that they only sold so much of it.
I didn't know that was also a thing. That's pretty cool. All right, we're actually kind of getting close to running out of time.
Oh, okay.
So, okay. We have a new entry, right?
That's a Microsoft rare.
So, here we go. Microsoft, the computer guys, they had noticed that it had always basically been between two, right? Like Nintendo and Sega were at it.
Right.
Sega had to drop. That there was, you had, Nintendo and Sony, they were at it, and then someone dropped. And all throughout the history of the video game console, that's how it's been, right? Atari 2600, ColecoVision, and Intellivision. Those were the three, one bows out, and then you're left with two. That's the way it has evolved for a super long time. This changes that entire rhythm. Xbox is still around, Nintendo's still around, and Sony's still around. I'm gonna stop taking questions just because we're running out of time. If we have a little bit of time, I'll go back to audience comments. So, Halo changed what first-person shooters were. It was iconic. Black, really great game. Fable, Morrowind, Grand Theft Auto. The development of this is a really fun story. I encourage you guys to go find it. It's basically a computer, but they were building an app that would let you play games on this app, almost like an early version of Steam. That'd be an executable for the Windows computers of that time. And it was almost too big. It needed so many extra processors. They said, it does not going to cost us anything. We don't have to pay for a monitor like it's a laptop. It's almost cheaper for us to put it as a game console. They did. Microsoft Games was born, and some of the greatest hits ever came out on that. Now we're getting into Generation 7. PS3 comes out, and they start including Blu-ray. We get more Killzone, Uncharted, Last of Us, Tomb Raider, Gran Turismo 5, Initial D. Love that game. If you guys haven't played it in the arcade, awesome. Definitely try to go give it a play today. Great console. Again, now we're really into the pattern of when you make a sequel to a console, it's got to be better. Not just calling it like, so they didn't have like the PlayStation and the Play World and yada yada yada. They did PlayStation, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. They stopped coming up with new names. This is their brand. This is what it's going to be. They're going to keep moving it forward. Great system. Xbox 360. Again, they haven't dropped out yet. They're still there. They found their audience. They found their niche, especially by doing more mature games. Halo Reach, God of War, Assassin's Creed, Fable, Forza. I probably played 360 more than just about anything else as far as like time. It's so much fun. The games are great. They're cheap now. We have not heard, pun intended, of Nintendo for a long time. We're still on the GameCube. What are they gonna do? The Wii. While it's iconic now, Nintendo has a thing with weird controllers, don't they? But it always works, and it always aggravates me, right? Because like, they can get away with anything. They have such good games. We played it on a remote. And like we have been stuck with, we destroyed the Jaguar for having those buttons.
Yes, but it works.
And we love it. I love it. I shouldn't love it. I should hate it. I love it. Wii Sports Resort. That should really be the same thing, but they're great games. Metroid Prime, Super Mario Galaxy, Skyward Sword, Wii Fit. Well, Wii Fit is not a great success now. It was really, really innovative for its time. The kind of like DDR was kind of a thing, was a plugin for GameCube. There were a lot of kind of, there was a Donkey Kong bongo game that you could play on GameCube, and Wii was trying to become, they were really trying to integrate real life in video games. And now that's very common. Gamification is a term that companies use when they want to take their training, bring it online, and make a game out of it for their employees. It's extremely common now. Nintendo was already doing that. They did a great job. Even though it looked like this, I shouldn't like it. I love it. Because you can turn it. All right. Generation 8. PS4. Destiny, Last of Us, Infamous, PlanetSide 2, Order 1886. Who remembers that one?
All 5 minutes of it?
Basically. I thought it was really interesting that they gave them permission to do a movie on PS4, basically. I kind of liked it, but I could not, it was not a game. Interesting proof of concept, though. I enjoyed it. They added in touch bars. This is where it kind of starts getting stagnant, honestly, because we're not getting new stuff. Xbox One. Now it's the games that are giving us the innovation. It's the game developers, not necessarily the console developers. They're just trying to get the peak stats so that the game developers can do what they need to do. Titanfall, more Halo, more Forza, Tomb Raider, more Assassin's Creed. They're great. Oh, Wii U. Splatoon, Super Mario Maker, Mario Kart 8, Hyrule Warriors, Zombie U. That was supposed to be the biggest game. Zombie U. We never hear of it. Great idea, great concept. Came from the DS, especially, and it's a fun console to play with, but it takes too much work to play.
Also, it's games are on Switch now.
Exactly. It became irrelevant very quickly. It did not do, graphically, it did not improve enough on the Wii to follow that now consistent trend of vast improvements and generation leaps. They didn't do it. They went for hardware, which had been the weak point before, and it wasn't super appreciated at this time.
And weak marketing.
Now, into the future. Who remembers this one? When I first made this panel, this was gonna be the bomb. Ooh. We remember this?
Oh yeah.
God, yes.
Yeah, who bought one? No one? Notice the second paragraph, that square box, awesome idea, totally flopped.
Controllers work with the Amazon Fire Stick.
Interesting idea, reinventing it. It had been a while since someone had honestly been brave enough to do it. I love that it was that brave.
I'm just showing 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I thought you were, hey. Steam machine. Interesting idea. It's like a computer but worse, and you pay triple for it. And that's it. That was a Steam machine.
They made better games.
There was nothing exclusively for it. There was no real drive for it. What I love, I got the Steam Link, and I got the Steam controller, and I use a PC. And that's how I play my controller games on it. And it works pretty well, but there's really no need for the Steam machine. The idea was you could play your entire library of all of your games on a machine that suited you. But we would just rather get a gaming PC.
Yeah.
I game PC, I game Atari, I have no preference, I'm not on either side. But this was a bad idea. More into the future, the Switch. Yeah.
We hope for the GameCube games.
We are waiting on that to come. This paid off so well for Nintendo. They were sold out. You couldn't get one, and I don't know how. Nintendo is a story of amazing games on consoles that should never work, but they always do. And that's why they're Nintendo, and you can't touch them. They're just fantastic.
I mean, it's a great console.
See, I love it. I'm getting one this summer, and I'm so excited.
Still
for
have
it.
it?
I waited 13 hours in line on launch day to get this.
Wow.
13 hours.
Yeah.
And it was worth it?
I was launch day as well. It was so worth it.
I've been in an airplane, and the guy's played it. I've been in the Japanese subway station, and the guy plays it. I have seen these everywhere. I was on the bullet train, and two friends had it on the tray. They were playing it. It is such a great idea. And it works. It works really, really well. And they're combining the idea of the handheld and the console. And that's where we're kind of at right now. People are trying to innovate, but we need something more, and Nintendo's the one bringing that. So who knows what the future will bring. That is the history of the home video game console, from the first to the last.
I just want to say,
Yeah. You got a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Which one is your first one?
Ooh, which one's my favorite? I love the Atari 2600 because the games of the time did a lot for what games later became. Favorite what? My favorite brand is probably Sega, because I love their marketing and they did a great job with stuff. Unfortunately,
how do you not know about Sega PlayStation?
the what? I mostly focus on the American video game market. I was only last year when I went to Japan that I really started getting into that side of stuff. Unfortunately, this is like a memoriam. This was the most amazing video game store in North Charlotte, North Carolina. They closed. They had all of the consoles, they had, this is where I built my collection. And unfortunately, we went out of business recently. So, thank you all for coming. I hope you guys learned something. If you liked my panel, let the staff know. I'd be happy to come back next year. I love running panels. I love running panels that we talk like this, that we can have conversations. We're all just game fans, and I like to keep it open. So please let staff know if you liked it. I cannot tell you how much that means. If two of you say it, it lets me come back. I can come back with the handheld stuff. And I have my business cards up here. If you have feedback to the panel, if you want to see the arcade version or the handheld version or the rare weird console version, which I'm working on now that you guys have educated me, let me know. So feel free to come up, take a card, all that fun stuff. Nice meeting you guys. Right.